This message comes from Jackson. Taxes aren't something you can only think about once a year. With investments, planning for tax day is year-round. Fortunately, Jackson offers tax-efficient products. Visit jackson.com for more information on how our products can make your tax bill a little bit less painful. Jackson is short for Jackson Financial Incorporated, Jackson National Life Insurance Company, Lansing, Michigan, and Jackson National Life Insurance Company of New York, Purchase, New York.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Psych Legal Pop Podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about popular culture through the lens of an attorney and a therapist. I'm Brooke Brigham, and I'm the attorney.
And I'm Tess Brigham. I'm the therapist.
And today we are going to be talking about a new documentary that's out on Netflix. It is called Cold Case, The Tylenol Murders. And anyone of a certain age is going to remember this. It was a very, very big news story, and because it was very frightening. So before we get into the documentary, I'm just going to read a short synopsis of the basics of this case. So the Chicago Tylenol murders were a series of poisoning deaths resulting from drug tampering in the Chicago metropolitan area in 1982. The victims consumed Tylenol-branded acetaminophen capsules that had been laced with potassium cyanide. At least 7 people died in the original poisonings, and there were several more deaths in subsequent copycat crimes. No suspect has been charged or convicted of the poisonings as of 2025. But New York City resident James W. Lewis was convicted of extortion for sending a letter to Tylenol's manufacturer, Johnson & Johnson, that took responsibility for the deaths and demanded $1 million to stop them. The incidents led to reforms in the packaging of over-the-counter drugs and to federal anti-tampering laws. So just briefly about the deaths and the early public safety concerns. On September 28, 1982, 12-year-old Mary Kellerman was hospitalized after consuming a capsule of extra-strength Tylenol. She died the next day. On September 29th, 6 other individuals consumed contaminated Tylenol, including Adam Janis, Stanley Janis, and Teresa Janis, who each took Tylenol from a single bottle. All 6, the Janices, Mary McFarland, Paula Prince, and Mary Rainier, would ultimately die from consuming the pills. Asked to investigate the Janices' deaths, nurse Helen Jensen, Arlington Heights' only public health official, visited the Janis household and discovered a Tylenol bottle with an accompanying receipt indicating it had been purchased the same day. Noticing that there were 6 pills missing, she turned the bottle over to investigator Nick Pichos and reported her suspicion that it was related to the Janices' deaths. Pichos called Edmund Donahue, deputy chief medical examiner for Cook County, who suspected that cyanide may be the culprit. Asked Pichos to smell the bottle. When Pichos smelled an almond-like scent, Donahue asked the county's chief toxicologist, Michael Schaefer, to test the capsules, and Schaefer's team determined that 4 of the 44 remaining capsules from the Janices bottle contained nearly 3 times the fatal amount of cyanide. Authorities held a press conference advising the public not to take Tylenol for the time being. By chance, the bottle of Tylenol that Kellerman used was inventoried by paramedics. Investigators noticed that the Janis bottle and the Kellerman bottle came from the same lot, and Johnson & Johnson issued a recall for all Tylenol from that lot. But when tainted bottles from other lots were discovered, the recall expanded to cover those lots and any bottle of extra-strength capsules from any lot purchased in the Chicago area, making it one of the largest pharmaceutical recalls ever. So that's how this started. And then after word got out, it caused, quite a bit of panic, not just, I think Johnson & Johnson was scrambling. I think they ended up they ended up expanding the recall to, like I said, to anything, any extra strength. And it was only every single one of these pills that was consumed, it was extra strength capsules. And they're the capsules where it's like two pieces put together. It's like red and white. And so those are capable of being pulled apart. And, there's medicine inside of it. And so the theory came to, one of the theories that came to be because they saw that these had been manufactured in different locations, which made it seem like it wasn't an internal problem at the Johnson & Johnson factory. It kind of seemed like someone was randomly going around and taking these bottles of bottles of capsules and putting cyanide in, putting them back, and putting them on the shelves. And this is before those tamper-proof tops, which this is what precipitated that law. But it's kind of, I'm trying to remember. I remember you used to go and you buy a bottle of whatever, and the plastic cap would pop right off, and all that was in there was like a piece of cotton.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was like, that's the only thing protecting the medicine is some cotton. But they didn't have like the seal over the top and then the plastic seal over the cap and all of that. And that's how we got here.
Yeah.
How this all started.
So do you remember, because this, as you mentioned earlier, this is very much a very Gen X documentary because, for us, we were kids. And so we were I remember this, and I remember feeling like it was just so prevalent. And then watching this documentary, I'm like, oh, it was only in Chicago, right? I mean, we grew up in Northern California. So why was I concerned? Why was I so worried about this thing that was in Chicago? But that's really what happened, was that it became this news story. And then do you remember that this happened? These deaths happened in September. I feel like it was that Halloween is when, remember, there was something changed where our parents had to start looking at all our candy and making sure that nothing was open. And
that was happening. That was happening long before.
Was that happening before? Yeah. Because there was all of that stuff. Because I remember there was a time where people stopped giving away candy. They were giving out money. Like people just, because the candy thing panicked parents and kids.
Well,
I guess that's a different story. I guess because there was some sort of room where was poison found in candy?
No. Okay. Here's the thing. So I was 13 when this happened. So I remember a bit more. The candy thing had been a urban myth for years. Okay. Yeah. It was like I don't think our parents ever checked our candy, but,
our mom would, and then she would take it.
Well, that was just a ruse.
Well, yeah, no, that's what I meant. She would just be like, this one, I'm like, it was something she wanted. I feel like, oh, this one's open.
Yeah. I remember hearing at some point, this is total anecdotal, whatever. But I remember hearing that there was literally never a case ever of razor blades or pins or whatever found in Halloween candy. Like there's no record of that ever happening. And there was a report that was put out by the American Confectioners, Association, because it was giving Halloween candy a bad name. It was people didn't want to give it out or whatever. So I don't know, but that had been happening for a while. But this Tylenol thing was the first time where there was any drug related tampering that people that I was aware of, or that, I mean, it was very mysterious because, like you said, it did seem to be concentrated to this one area, although there were other people outside of the Chicago area. But I think what happened was they did that recall so quickly, and word got out so quickly. It was on the nightly news. It was the biggest story for weeks and months. And so you couldn't get away from it. So everyone was just throwing their Tylenol away and not buying Tylenol. And so by getting it off the streets, so to speak, like so quickly, it prevented any more deaths. But also what they said was there were obviously other people who died from it that they just couldn't trace it to or didn't know. Like if you were elderly and one day you just died, someone found you dead, they didn't think anything of it. They're like, they just died. And they didn't test for cyanide in autopsies. That was not a standard procedure.
You have to ask.
Yeah.
Like, unless they think it, then they have to ask. So yeah, if someone, and again, this was in the 80s where, to live to 70 was a long time.
Yeah.
So it really, literally like 60 and above, they're, old age, and they're not going to test for that. And yeah, what was it? She gave another example of like someone who's, you take the pill and you're driving and you have a seizure and it's a car accident. Like no one's then going to test you for suicide. Cyanide, it's going to become.
Yeah. They just think it's an accident.
Yeah.
So they're not attributing it to the cyanide, but yeah, you pointed out that, and even though it was a long time ago, before the internet and before news became instantaneous, the news did spread pretty quickly. And they had police going through the neighborhoods in Chicago with bullhorns and speakers and telling people, because this is the only way to do a mass communication to a specific group of people. Telling people if, don't take Tylenol and, So.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. I was like, oh yeah, this is how else do you get information to people? And people were going door to door, like volunteers were going door to door, like, hi, do you have Tylenol? Don't take it. So that to make sure that everyone had the information. But, it's funny because you think about that of what would happen today, right? Everyone would have the information very quickly. But back then, everyone did get the information rather quickly because everyone did tune into the news.
Yeah.
So, I think as long as we've had media, there has always been this place to get instant information at some level.
That's true. The nightly news, it was an institution. It was in our house, 5 o'clock. The nightly news was on. And you'd watch like, I don't know, half an hour or an hour of local news. And then they do the world news with whatever network, Peter Jennings or Tom Brokaw or whoever. And then they'd go back and they'd be like another half hour of local news. So you had like a couple hours every night where people tuned in to see what was happening.
Plus there was 11 o'clock news. Remember that?
Yeah.
If something happened between 5 and 11, they could then report it again at 11. So yeah. And then there was morning news. So there was, we really didn't need 24-hour news coverage. It was the last thing that we ever needed.
I guess if something happened in the middle of the night, you just had to wait until the morning to find out.
Yes.
We all survived.
But this really started. So this was the impact of the Tylenol murders, which I think is a couple different things, right? Obviously the packaging and how, creating all these safeguards with the packaging. But also I feel like these Tylenol, like this was sort of this first time that I remember where, this sort of known institution, this product that everybody uses, collectively there's a problem. And I think what is also scary for people is always these mass murder, like these kinds of situations where there's no rhyme or reason. That is always scary for people because if it's someone's partner or if it's a relative, you could be like, well, that's not my situation, or I would never pick that partner, or I wouldn't do this, or I wouldn't do drugs and go into that neighborhood, like whatever it is. But this is one where it's a little bit like, how do you prevent this?
Yeah. Well, you prevent it by just ridding the world of Tylenol. And that's kind of what happened. Like Johnson. So Johnson & Johnson was a household name. They made everything. They made baby oil. They made Tylenol. Tylenol, they talked about, this was before like ibuprofen was even like a big thing.
Tylenol was 25% of their profits.
Yeah.
Like a fourth.
I think it was more
everything.
than that. I think it was 30. I thought it was like 37%.
Oh, I have 25%.
Well, anyway, Johnson & Johnson was a highly, highly respected company, corporate conglomerate. They made so many products and that was everything. Their reputation was everything that, So they moved very quickly to take all the Tylenol off the shelves. They even were stopping people at the border coming into the United States, asking them, do you have any Tylenol? And if they did, they had to, throw it away. They're trying to rid the world of it. And they did it very swiftly. And they acted like they were doing this investigation. They said they were doing this internal investigation because, they were asked, is there any way cyanide could have gotten into the pills in the manufacturing? Oh, no. We don't have any cyanide in this building at all where these pills are manufactured. And everyone just kind of went, okay, well, fast forward too, we find out that was a lie.
Yeah, they did have cyanide.
They did have cyanide. They used it to somehow clean, in the process of cleaning the equipment, or
I thought it was like a way to test the lead in the caps or something. It was part of quality control. And so this didn't come out until the second round of deaths in 1986, right? Or much later, because at first they were like, no, there's no cyanide, and they were able to say, no, there's no cyanide. And everyone believed it because it was made at different manufacturers. If everything came from one plant in one area, that would be one thing. But this was like the pill bottles. Yes, they all converged into the Chicago area, but some were made in one manufacturing plant and another one was made in this plant over here. So, so they were able to just dismiss it. But I was under that it was the second round of murders that came out. We can get into that. That when that happened, that's when they went back and were like, is there cyanide? And they admitted, yeah, there's cyanide, but it's locked up. It's very little and it's locked up and it's just for this use. And then it was discovered, no, wasn't locked up. Anyone could go in there and use it and anyone could do it. So now we're back to, and I was hoping the documentary would get into this of disgruntled employee. I mean, right? If you think about it, if it happened at Johnson & Johnson, there's a problem in your manufacturing process? Is it someone who is deliberately doing this? That's what makes me wonder. It's like, did J&J kind of do this all internally? Right? Like because it would be better for them to just say, oh no, it's not us. And then maybe they find out it's some disgruntled employee, they fire that person and then like, oh yeah, we're good. And we're going to recall everything. It just, they were taken off the hook very quickly.
Yeah. And they were allowed to basically destroy all the evidence. They recalled the pills, took the pills off the shelves and destroyed them.
Yeah.
So there was no way to do like random testing or, and also, even though, I don't know, I mean, the cyanide thing, even in the ones in 82, why wouldn't it be plausible that there could be cyanide involved in that one? Because they said it was just in testing for lead in the caps.
This is what I remember. So that was the whole thing, because at first they said, no, there's no cyanide here at all. We do not have cyanide in our plants. And then here, let me move my notes down to the, in 1986, there was another Tylenol scare that happened in New York State around Yonkers. And again, J&J, their attitude was like, there's another maniac on the loose, tampering with our stuff. And so 2 more show up on the shelves and everyone's like, how does someone get through 3 safety mechanisms? Right? Because before in 82, it was really plausible that someone could go to a store, gently open it up, put the cyanide, and put it back in and no one would be the wiser. By 1986, everyone's like, well, how do you get through all this tampering? How do you do it? So what they were saying in the documentary is then people started looking at the 1982 incidents differently.
Yeah.
Suddenly now it's the same exact problem, but everything that you did to safeguard it. So now we're back to, isn't it has to be
internal
the manufacturing plant.
It's not a packaging issue.
Yeah.
This is a manufacturing issue, because you're right. Because they couldn't have gotten through. And even in 1982, I find it hard to believe that someone, and this was their theory. Yeah, it was a madman running around, going into CVS, opening bottles and putting cyanide in the capsules and putting them back together and putting it in there. You know what a mess that would make? Like, you know what an ordeal that would be?
Yeah, you can't do it at the store. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, you can't. And also, even doing it, even if you bought a bunch of bottles or stole them and left the premises and went and did your thing and brought them back. And it happened that many times that it got out to that many bottles that this many people ended up taking. That's a lot of work. And that's a lot of going in and out of the store. And, they had security cameras in there because they had a shot of the woman, that one flight attendant woman, or the woman, or was it the new mom who, was in the store buying the Tylenol?
Yeah, this was the flight attendant.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they had security cameras. They would have had security cameras of someone in there acting suspiciously, like putting, bottles back on the shelf. I don't know. I just got this gut sense watching this that this madman theory makes no sense. It's not plausible, and it had to be internal. It was inside the manufacturing plant.
Because what they're saying, right, and this is said more to the end of the third episode, what they're really spelling out is J&J, what suspect is allowed to do their own investigation?
Right.
J&J, they should have been looked at. And it sounds like what happened was that it was just like J&J went, no, we don't have any cyanide. We're good. But, that's fine. We'll just take all the pill bottles back and we're all good. So, yeah.
Yeah, we're just going to throw these away.
Yeah, we're good. And I have to say, if you want to know, like I think that this whole J&J thing, whoever their branding person, I know brands wasn't a thing then, but whoever their PR branding person that put together this strategy is pretty genius. Because what they did, which I think was so smart, is instead of making it like we're this big bad corporation and we've done something wrong, it was like, we are victims too. This madman is out there, and here you have Tylenol and you trust us. And now this madman is making you not trust us. So you need to keep trusting us.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that was the whole thing. It was all just about, and it was very smart because it made it so that we weren't mad at J&J. We weren't, I do often wonder in the world that we live in today, what would this be like? Because back then, I think there was a lot more, there wasn't a lot of corporations weren't required to be transparent at all. I think that people want a lot more or expect a lot more transparency in the world today. But back then, all they needed to do was say, oh, we are victims too.
Yeah. No, corporations weren't looked at the way they are today. They were trusted more. And this particular corporation was very trusted.
Yeah.
Very, very trusted. And they just capitalized on that. And you're right. It was like, oh my gosh, this is making us look bad. And
and we are victims just like you. We're not at fault. And so, and it sounds like, because apparently Reagan, who was the president at the time, wanted the FBI to get involved. And so there is this question of like, well, what did the FBI do? Obviously they're not going to reveal anything to us, but like, so did anyone investigate this? Did anyone bother? It really does feel a little bit like it's like a good old boys club of all these like old white guys who are just like, oh, okay. Yeah. You're going to check it out. Great. Okay, perfect. And then let's just move right along.
Well, the local police did want to, they did investigate. They did want to find someone responsible, and they zeroed in on this guy.
Yeah, let's talk about this guy. This was quite the story.
Yeah, what is his name again?
Well, he has a couple different names. So the first one was Robert Richardson. So basically what happened was after the 7th person passed away, that was Paula Prince, they formed a task force and they get this letter from someone who says, it's an extortion letter, which is, you need to give me $1 million or there will be more killings to follow. Mm-hmm. This is my address. Like, this is the bank account to deposit
send it into. Here. Yeah.
So they traced the account. They felt like it was a legitimate letter because some of the details in the letter were things that weren't in the public, that this person seemed to know a lot about what was going on. And they traced the account back to a guy by the name of Fred McKay, who was the owner of this place called Lakeside Travel in Chicago. And he comes from this very wealthy family. So people are like, well, it can't be Fred. Fred wouldn't do this. And they say, well, do you have any enemies? And he says, well, actually, yeah, there's this guy, Robert Richardson. I used to employ his wife, Nancy. And I guess apparently her last check, she was fired or she was let go or she left. The last check bounced. And I guess Robert Richardson was pissed. And so they did some comparisons. They found that the handwriting looked like handwriting that they had of Richardson. But the Richardson had already left town. And this guy, they had a picture of Paula Prince at one of these stores at CVS or one of these stores. And they found it that in the security camera, mm-hmm. they could see a man staring at her, and they start to suspect, like, is this guy, is he the one doing this? And because does he want to watch them pay for the purchases? Is this mm-hmm. part of his kink or something, or what, part of his lunacy? And so, and he looked a lot like him, but again, these are, grainy security photos. Mm-hmm. So they figure out it's actually another local police person in Missouri who sees the picture of Robert Richardson and goes, no, that's not Robert Richardson. That's this guy, James Lewis. Calls the FBI, and then they start working on, and then we start learning about this guy, James Lewis, who apparently was someone that people described as having no compassion, no emotion, very cold-blooded. He had 17 aliases. Lewis had he had a tough life. His mother abandoned all the kids in a motel, and then he was adopted by parents. He was an only child, had emotional difficulties, but he got married. He went to the University of Missouri, got married, and he and his wife had one child who had Down syndrome, and she had basically what happened was that she died at age 5 because she had this, I guess it was this
a heart defect.
And I guess the materials that they used were J&J materials. This is one of the things they suspect with this guy is that, and he blamed J&J for the death of his daughter.
Because it failed.
Because it failed.
Was like a patch that was patching a hole in her heart, and it failed, and she died. And so he has this vendetta against Johnson & Johnson.
So, and in the documentary, we meet James Lewis. So that always makes you go, okay, this is interesting. What did you think of him?
Well, he's an odd one. He, mm-hmm. is very creepy looking and creepy.
Yeah, those teeth.
Feeling. It's just, he's strange, talks weird. And also the fact that he was willing to talk, and he kind of seemed to want to be mm-hmm. involved in this, but yet he wasn't. He's saying, I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Well, then why are you here?
Yeah. His whole thing was so weird. I mean, in terms of the Tylenol murder part, right, he was eventually convicted of extortion for writing the letter, because that is illegal, making threats. Mm-hmm. And he was given 10 years, which was the maximum. And it sounds like he served all 10 years. Mm-hmm. It's federal prison. And, but that there were some other things that were surrounding him that were very suspicious. We get into this whole story about this guy, Raymond West, who was a neighbor of his. So we learned that James and his wife started a tax service. And the oddest thing is that everybody, there were 5 or 6 victims of identity theft. And guess what? All of them had their taxes done by the Lewises. Oh, so, I mean, that right there will tell you something. Like, this guy was not we never even heard from him. He didn't claim innocence or guilt when it came to this, but obviously he had, a lot of the ways they were describing as being cold and no compassion, no empathy. It's like, yeah, stealing from your clients, that would be lack of empathy, lack of,
now,
understanding.
What was his connection to the guy who they found dismembered? And
that's Ray West. So Raymond West was his name. Raymond West was someone who, I guess, their daughter Tony, the girl with Down syndrome, his daughter, when she was young, I think that Raymond West took an interest in her or the family. It was a little strange of like, he kind of showed up one day and started asking questions and then wanted the Lewises to handle his taxes. And so apparently, I guess maybe he did handle the taxes. So Ray West said that he thought James was strange. And then all of a sudden Ray disappears. This is July of 1978. And then they find, so, he's got family and they're trying to figure out where is he. They found a note on his door saying that he had gone away for a while, but it was in Lewis's handwriting. And so they finally went into his house and they find, blood seeping down from the ceiling. And they go up into the attic and it's it's Ray West dismembered and, different up in the attic. And they did find in his house, they found hairs on a soap that matched Lewis and his DNA. The other thing was that they discovered that apparently Lewis cashed a $5,000 check that Ray apparently wrote to him, which is not true. And they determined that was a forgery. And, even when Lewis was talking about it, he was like, oh, well, I needed a short-term loan. I was going to pay it back. But no sort of like, yeah, but you still stole it. He didn't know that you were going to take money from him, even though you saw it as a short-term loan.
Yeah, at this point in the documentary, I had a hard time understanding why they were doing such a deep dive into James Lewis when it turned out to be a dead end.
Yeah, spoiler alert, because we do spend a lot of time with him. Now, the minute he showed up in the documentary, I was like, oh, okay, I don't know if maybe this it's going to turn out that it's not him.
Well, obviously he'd be in prison if
yeah, that's true.
If it was him.
But it turns out, so they could not convict him because it looked like James had maybe done this. Like a lot of the stuff pointed.
But he did a lot of weird, bad stuff. But how was he connected to the Tylenol?
He wrote the extortion letter.
Right.
So he already had, so Lewis already had the stink around him because of this. He was, the number one suspect in this murder. They could not convict him because he was never read his Miranda rights. So everything got thrown out. So he walked away. But when they did go into his house, they found a lot of other evidence and they found the extortion letters. And that's his connection to the Tylenol murders, was that he claims he did not hurt anybody, but that he these Tylenol murders are happening. I'm going to jump on the bandwagon and write an extortion letter and then essentially set up my enemy, Fred, to take the fall.
Right. But the extortion letter happened to be, he took advantage of this Tylenol thing, but there was no evidence whatsoever that he put cyanide in the Tylenol. You know what I mean? So the ultimate mystery here is how did the cyanide get into the Tylenol? And so I really just felt like it went out on a limb. And it's like, yeah, I understand that this guy's a weirdo and he wrote the extortion letter to Johnson & Johnson, but this gets us nowhere with who put the cyanide in the Tylenol. So I felt like they could have cut all of that out, quite frankly, or maybe condensed it down to about 30 seconds that, there was this ancillary thing over here. Cause he never went, after that, never went to jail or was convicted of anything. And then he just died.
Yeah. Well, he was the number one suspect in a rape.
But again,
again, had nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
I think they were sharing all that information as a way of showing you, like, listen, James is shady. He's super shady. But you're right in the sense that maybe it was the way the documentary organized it. This is what I wish these documentaries would do.
Yeah,
I wish they would organize things a little bit better, because it becomes very confusing. Because what I end up doing is, I have 11 pages, 12 pages of notes, because I don't know what's important.
You don't know what's relevant.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what's relevant to what we're talking about. And it would have been nice if they just said, hey, let's meet James. He was and still is considered the number one suspect, but he was never convicted. Let me tell you a little bit about James. Like, tell us what James's part of the story is. And I understand they're trying to, like, create mystery and where's this going? And then, the end of the first episode into the second episode is the reveal of, oh, we've got James here as part of the documentary. And what are we going to learn and all of that? But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. A good third of this 3-part documentary is devoted to this guy, James, who has done a lot of bad stuff.
Right. But nothing related to the mystery of the cyanide.
Yes. The only thing that he was truly related to was the extortion letter.
Yeah.
And then they interviewed him again towards the later part of his life. And apparently he said something that kind of tripped him up a little bit, that made it seem like, oh, wait a second. You seem to know about these, like, that he wrote the letter before all the information came out on the news. Like, how would he have known all these things to write the letter if he wasn't really the killer? But he kind of backtracked that. So I guess I wonder, it's a little bit like, it feels a little bit like the filmmakers felt that, I don't know, that they had to talk about this guy because this guy has always been the number one suspect of law enforcement and all these agencies, and that he's Psych Legal Pop. We'll be back after these messages.
This message comes from Jackson. Taxes aren't something you can only think about once a year. With investments, planning for tax day is year-round. Fortunately, Jackson offers tax-efficient products. Visit jackson.com for more information on how our products can make your tax bill a little bit less painful. Jackson is short for Jackson Financial Incorporated, Jackson National Life Insurance Company, Lansing, Michigan, and Jackson National Life Insurance Company of New York, Purchase, New York.
But why don't you think at a certain point law enforcement saw that this was going nowhere and they had no proof that I don't know. I felt like the law enforcement got really hung up on it too.
Yes. And that's part of the problem.
Yeah. They should have been going in a different direction.
Yes. They got very stuck on him.
Yes. And because this is a unsolved case, I think they just put all this in just to make a longer documentary. And again, this is one of my complaints about documentaries is that, you know what, there's an art in telling the story in a concise way, and you don't need to make it 2, 3, 5 hours and put in all this tangential stuff. It's just confusing.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because it's almost a little bit like we're talking about law enforcement is stuck on James Lewis. Well, so were the filmmakers.
Yeah.
You guys were doing the exact same thing that they're doing. So why? Why?
Because it was a juicy story. I mean, God, you got someone being dismembered. You got, look at all this. Yeah. I mean, it's bizarre. Yeah, his childhood, his daughter dying, like all of it. This man's life is just a train wreck. So yeah, but they didn't need to put it in. And again, I thought it was confusing because I kept thinking, well, what does this have to do? Does this have to do with, am I missing something?
Well, yeah. And they kept coming back to him. So then it was like, oh, okay. The extortion letter, he does the 10 years, he comes out again. So we hear about this rape that he's accused of. And then I'm like, okay, so we're going to get somewhere. No, not the woman didn't testify, not convicted. And then we hear from a jailhouse informant that claimed that Lewis told him that he really did it. And again, you cannot take any of that for anything. So it feels a little bit like, yeah, you're playing the same game with us. But law enforcement, like, you got to let go of Lewis. There was someone else that they mentioned that also was a bit of a suspect at some point. Let's see. Yeah, this is after the so this is in 1986. I guess in the second wave, who was the second person that there was someone else, Arnold. Why can't I find my notes?
Well, so this 1986 one was this, because they talked about there were copycat incidents where people were tampering with other medicines and putting things in eye drops. And so was this 1986 thing, was this a copycat or?
Well, that's what they thought. And that's what, like that, again, J&J comes in and goes, oh my God, another madman's on the loose, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to take their position of someone's trying to destroy us. Mm-hmm. But now it shows up, like I was saying before, now it shows up in the New York area, and you've got, how is someone getting through three mm-hmm. different, manufacturing device, these packaging, how are they able to do that? And so the last episode, they really talk about, so one of the victims' daughters, when she became a mother, spent some time like trying to understand what happened, mm-hmm. Trying to understand what happened to her mom. And then she went into this whole thing about how we hear this story about the day before in Chicago, the day before the murders happened, a police officer found a bunch of capsules, mm-hmm. Tylenol capsules, and that was with cyanide, like out on the ground of a parking lot of a Howard Johnson's. And, this was a little bit like, okay. And so the daughter believes, like, it sounds like her theory is that she believes that for her mom had just had a baby, that she thought those pills came from the hospital, that her mom had a bottle of pills that were actually just the regular strength, but mm-hmm. she had gotten extra strength from the hospital, mm-hmm. and that had dumped them into that bottle and mixed them together.
Okay. And here's my point. Okay. A couple points on this.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, about whether the Tylenol came from the hospital or the bottle, who cares? You know what I mean?
No, I'm with you. Again.
But that's the thing. They're presenting these things as if they have some significance. Mm-hmm. Who cares where it came from? She got it, and it was a sealed, and those were like little sealed where they give you the smaller packets that I don't know.
Yeah, what do they call them? Buster pack.
Yeah.
Buster.
So
right.
that would have been sealed, the one from the hospital. Mm-hmm. It couldn't have been tampered with. So, and then the cop, was the guy a cop who found the stuff on the ground?
Yes.
Yeah. So the cop who finds, to me, that's just too easy. That's someone planting that there to like get off on it, to get a rent, mm-hmm. to watch him find it and what somebody planted that. They showed the pictures of it. The capsules are all like crushed up. It was almost like someone was, because look, it'd be pretty hard to take capsules apart and neatly then put them back together. Mm-hmm. The stuff spills everywhere.
You need a workstation.
Exactly. You need to like one of those factory assembly line things. Yes. So someone was trying to do this, wanted someone to find it, and I don't know, because the cop, he just touched it, and the reaction mm-hmm. that he had from just touching it, made his arm just turn all red and whatever. So I just think that was some sick person who put that there so they could watch and see what mm-hmm. happened. So again, you look at that, if this is like something in isolation, and they just keep throwing these things in here, like, oh, and look over here, look what mm-hmm. happened here. So by the end of it, you're like, okay, I think if you ignore all that extraneous stuff, what you come back to is either there was a madman out there mm-hmm. poisoning stuff, or it came from the factory. And like you said, by 1986, they had the tamper-resistant whatever. So you can't be going to CVS and like. Mm-hmm. So again, it is the manufacturer, and the manufacturer actually lied about having cyanide.
Yes.
And the circumstances of the cyanide several times.
Yes.
So I really believe it was internal. It's Johnson & Johnson. Yeah. And because they were such a trusted brand And, they were so, poor us. And they recalled everything and just destroyed everything. They got away with it.
Yeah. And I think that it sounds like no one was really poking holes in anything. Why in 1982, you've got all of these people that are involved in the case. So why isn't anyone saying, hey, why are we letting J&J do their own internal investigation? Right. Why aren't we stopping? I mean, it didn't happen then. And then 86 comes around and they're like, well, yeah, sorry, we actually do have cyanide, but it's all lock and key. And then they find out, no, it's not. Anyone can get to it. The other guy that I mentioned was this guy, Roger Arnold, which is also, you're right, another sort of side story.
A red herring. Yeah.
A red herring. He's someone who got cyanide shipped to him, and he had chemistry sets and weapons and stuff, but again, nothing to prove anything. And then Roger ended up killing somebody that he thought ratted him out that had nothing to do with any of this stuff. And apparently he wasn't, I mean, that part's really, really crazy. Yeah. But, so, yeah, this investigation was problematic from the start. And then why didn't they do a different kind of investigation in 1986? Okay, you realized your mistake. This keeps happening. But it sounds like 86 rolled around and it was still a little bit like, but it's not a lot of cyanide and it's under lock and key. So let's just let them investigate it again and just blow this, push this away. Because in 86, I don't remember reading anything about another huge recall.
Well, you'd think if there was
maybe they did do a second recall.
If there was,
but again, they're getting rid of all the evidence,
right? And then clearly after that 86 thing, they said, "Look, we got to find a different way to clean this lead or whatever they're doing." I still don't understand what they're doing with cyanide, but they realized, okay, we got to find a better way to do this, and we need to maybe take this off-site to another location so that it's not near any of the actual pills. And they got it under control. But I truly believe that this is all just negligence on their part. And also, I mean, was there a federal investigation done?
I don't know.
They didn't even talk about that.
No. And they can't. I mean, obviously, the FBI is not going to release anything.
I mean, the pharmaceutical industry is heavily, heavily regulated. Okay.
Was it heavily regulated back then?
Well, probably not as heavily as today, but it always has been. Think about drugs. You're manufacturing drugs that can be lethal. So, if there was any possibility that a manufacturer was grossly negligent in doing this, this would have been such a huge investigation and a big ordeal. Yeah. And it's like, did we hear anything about that? No, and they don't even talk about this. Like, why don't you talk about the political stuff? Because we see the scene where, Burke, who is the CEO, he gets the Medal of Honor, Medal of Freedom from Reagan. Yeah.
And that's the thing is that what, the daughter who's been has been researching all of this, she comes out and says, what was the mystery to be solved was the fact that it was J&J all along, that it was J&J. But my question is this, and I wish they had talked about this, which is, what do they think happened? Do they think, because they have to have theories about how they thought the cyanide got into the pills. So do you think it's a disgruntled worker who got pissed and mad and decided to do that? Someone who's crazy and, a true madman and was like, oh, hey, let me put cyanide in these pills. Or was it truly just, oops, the cyanide got too close to things? Or because it sounds like it's very powerful. Like the guy just touches it with his hands and his hands started to swell up.
This is what they use in the death to put people to death. When someone's being killed by the government, death penalty, this is what they use.
Yeah.
It will kill you very, 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 very quickly and a very painful death.
So, yeah. So how... you have this dangerous thing. So how do you, I mean, because I don't think they're so negligent that they would have the cyanide out in the same place.
No.
Whoops, not the cyanide, it's this. I'm going to grab this instead. So How did that happen?
I think it doesn't take much. Okay, you remember a few years ago, there was a series of listeria outbreaks from these peanut butter manufacturing. It came about in the process of manufacturing peanut butter, and like the peanut, it was like dust, peanut dust or something would get into the cracks and crevices of these machines because they go through these machines. And if you don't clean the machines very, very thoroughly, then listeria can grow. And then that gets into the final product of the peanut butter. And it's been other products too. People die from this.
I mean, I know, with the lettuce, there was romaine lettuce,
nuts,
E. coli.
If you have nut remnants in things, and then someone has a nut allergy, and it gets so things happen in manufacturing that start out as very little careless things. Obviously, no one's pouring cyanide on the conveyor belt, but I just think it doesn't take much. It doesn't take. It's a little. Something gets a little too close. Even if a couple droplets fall, this stuff is so powerful. And maybe it gets into like one lot or, some pills in one lot. But that's all it takes, to kill, how many people? Like 8 people or 12 people, whatever it was.
It's interesting because it's almost like the J&J must have been thrilled when Lewis sent that extortion letter, because imagine if he had never sent the letter.
Takes the heat off of them.
We would have not known who he was. All of these other things that he had done has nothing to do with that. But it actually helped them tremendously, because now you have someone claiming it, and okay, great. Now you too are a victim versus, I mean, I think, I do wonder what would have happened if that letter hadn't happened. You would still be looking at J&J, and maybe because it came out very quickly too, right? Like if James Lewis had sat on, this idea of doing this letter for a month or something like that, maybe it would be different. But it was almost like, it's like the minute they started looking at J&J, there was this letter, and it's like, oh, it's not J&J.
Yeah,
it's
perfect.
Okay, great. All right, great. James Lewis, he fits the mold.
Yeah.
I think that's what they were really trying to show us, that he fits the mold of someone that you could believe would do this. Obviously he has, I believe, done some other things. So, and really, has really gotten away with a lot.
Yeah.
He's only done 10 years.
Yeah. I mean, I think the police, if they're asked to choose who they want to go after, and it's a choice of, American born and bred Johnson and Johnson and James, well, who do you think they're going to pick?
Yeah. And they did, I guess, from the statements that he made about when he wrote the letter, they were able to go search his house again. And again, they didn't find anything. And they've never had DNA that tracked back to him. And they found that he was living in New York when the Chicago murders happened. So how would you even do that? But I mean, I don't know. The more that we talk about it, like now that we're talking about it and processing, I'm realizing like, I had a lot of high hopes for it in the beginning of the documentary. I was like, because I was talking to you about it after I watched like the first episode and a half, because I kept thinking this James Lewis guy something was going to happen with him. But, I had high hopes for it. I thought they were going to talk more about, and they talk around it. I thought they were going to talk more about how this impacted, again, manufacturing, what the expectations were. I mean, again, people like back to the candy thing. Like, I really feel like before all of these things, like, people start really checking. There was all of these rumors and ideas, urban myths around someone being able to poison something in a package.
Well, again, we tend to think that, we're so technologically evolved, and I'm telling you, still in 2025, people die from things that happen in the process of manufacturing food and drugs. It happens, and we're not as far along maybe as we think we are. And you go into like the meat processing plants, and like all these places, this is a messy process of making food. And the machinery, and if you don't clean the machinery, it's the same with drugs, because it's the same kind of process. They have to mix the stuff, and then it goes into molds, and it's going on a conveyor belt, and I don't know who knows what's going into these products. I don't even know. So I think it's hard for us to believe that something so tragic could happen. But if you whether it's drugs or peanut butter, that people can be killed by modern manufacturing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I just wanted them to talk more about like the psychological impact and how people saw things. And because I remember this, like I remember it so distinctly. And I don't remember being like acutely scared or worried, but it was, being in grade school, it was shocking.
Well, because they sold everyone the narrative that it was a madman going around doing this. And what are the chances of that happening at your CVS? What I'm saying? Like, this is a remote possibility. So that's very different. It's kind of like the kidnapping stuff. You're afraid of it, but that the chances of it happening are small. But the chances of it happening are much larger in this context if it's this big corporation who's shipping out, that they're manufacturing this stuff that's contaminated, and then they're shipping it out. And that wasn't the narrative. The narrative was these are isolated incidents of a madman. And we've gotten rid of all of it. And we have this tamper-proof thing, so it can never, ever happen again.
And the guy that we believe did it is behind bars, right? Because he was behind bars. He was behind bars, I believe, when the 86 stuff happened. So, I mean, that's the other part of it too. I don't remember the 1986. I didn't realize that there was another wave of people.
I didn't remember that either. You mentioned the 86.
Yeah, well, that was in the documentary.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't remember that either. And I don't know. Again, how is that possible if you've got the tamper-proof stuff in place by then? It's not possible.
The other thing that I thought was, like, they interviewed lots of former police, and maybe someone, I don't know if there was anyone from the FBI, but lots of different police, but they did and reporters, but they did interview two different people that wrote books about the Tylenol murders. And it was like, so what was your book about? Like, did you spend the whole time talking about this James Lewis guy too? Because it was like, we have two, and these are just two of the books. I think there's probably many, many Tylenol murder books. So how could we write all of these books? Like, none of them talk about J&J's responsibility, or none of them, like, I would think that at least one of them would have been about, okay, it was J&J, and let me tell you, I did this investigation, or I'm an investigative reporter, and I'm going to tell you exactly what I came up with. I don't know. That part was weird.
I'm not buying it. I think it was an inside job. Not intentional, but negligent. It was negligence.
Yeah.
Human error. I don't know,
Yeah. I could go with that, or I could really go with someone, like, maybe not intentional, but just screwed up, picked the wrong bottle, picked something up.
Yeah.
And then didn't realize it, or realized it and kept their mouth shut. Or did J&J find them and fire them? Like, we don't even know. We have no idea, because they weren't as transparent as they made us to believe. Apparently the company was run like very tight-lipped.
Yeah. Well, that's corporate America.
Yes. And, even then, back then, though, these CEOs, they weren't making the kind of money that CEOs today make.
No.
That's the other thing, too. Corporations did feel very different, because these guys the gap wasn't as huge
they weren't
as it is
seen
today.
I don't think corporations were seen like as being evil like they are today. And they were, again, it was a trusted American brand. And nobody would ever think that this was because of their negligence. I don't remember hearing anybody, blaming them. But although I was 13, how close of attention was I really paying? But I wasn't paying that close of attention to the nightly news.
Yeah. You know what? It's just another Gen X, like one more thing that was dumped on us.
Yeah.
And basically like, yeah, madman's poisoning medicine. Good luck, kids. Bye. You know,
I don't know what if you have a headache, I don't know what you're going to do, but you know, tough it out.
Yeah, but make sure that you don't get kidnapped and drugs are bad and you're going to die of AIDS. Okay, right. Good luck. Go to school now.
So you can learn more about how awful the world is.
But no, there's no trigger warnings, no validation, no nothing, not one iota of it. It's just like moving on.
Yes. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us. We have documentaries. We talk about documentaries like this, whatever's, happening or we're interested in every Thursday. We are covering And Just Like That, the new season 3. Those episodes drop on like Sunday night, Monday morning-ish. And then we're finishing up. We have, when this comes out, one more episode of Sister Wives, the one-on-one part 4. So that'll drop on Monday. And then we're not sure if we're going to replace that with anything for a while. We might just do And Just Like That, which is, tune in for that. It's interesting. We're having some interesting discussions about midlife.
Yes.
If you speaking of Gen X,
Yes.
So if you like us and you'd like to support the podcast, we would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the podcast and tell people about it, spread the word. You can give us a 5-star rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really like us, we have a Patreon where we do a weekly bonus episode where we talk about popular culture topics that are happening in real time. We talk about our own lives a little bit. Sometimes we sprinkle in a little politics, but not too much, unless it's a really bad day. It could maybe be a lot of politics. But don't let that scare you. And then we have a higher tier where you can get a monthly true crime bonus episode and a monthly Ask Us Anything episode. So check that out on Patreon. We're also on YouTube. You may be watching us on YouTube. If you are, hello. And we're on all the social media channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky. We're not on X.
What's another one? Okay, there's that one.
I'm trying to keep track in my brain. So
it's a lot, hey, we were part of the Tylenol thing. That means we're old.
Yes. We have a little bit of brain fog sometimes. Yes. So anyway, thank you so much. Hope to see you back soon. Bye.
This message comes from Jackson. Taxes aren't something you can only think about once a year. With investments, planning for tax day is year-round. Fortunately, Jackson offers tax-efficient products. Visit jackson.com for more information on how our products can make your tax bill a little bit less painful. Jackson is short for Jackson Financial Incorporated, Jackson National Life Insurance Company, Lansing, Michigan, and Jackson National Life Insurance Company of New York, Purchase, New York.